Now, the LGBTQI National Task Team will have a multi-stakeholder dialogue aimed at reviewing the National Intervention Strategy. The task team was established by the Department of Justice and Correctional Development with the aim of responding to hate crimes against the LGBTQI community. Joining me now to talk about this is the Deputy Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Jeffery. Deputy Minister, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight on the Newsfeed Late Night.
Good evening and good evening to all the viewers. Thanks for having me.
First, let's talk about the nature and the extent of anti-LGBTQI hate crime in South Africa on individuals, but also on societies. We know that this is not, of course, just for South Africa. It faces many countries as well, but let's just focus it now in the country in particular.
Sure, it's unfortunately an international problem, as it were. The National Task Team got set up way back in 2011 by the then Minister of Justice, Jeffery, and it was in response to calls from civil society to do something about violence against LGBTI people, particularly attacks on lesbians, the so-called corrective rape of lesbians. So it was set up then. It came up with a National Strategic Plan in 2014, and this workshop is to review that plan and to see what's been doing right, what's being done, what could be done better. There's also a change in that gender-based violence. We now have a National Gender-Based Violence Council, which also sees itself as including violence against LGBTI people. So the National Task Team, which is a group of government representatives and civil society bodies, needs to reevaluate its position and chart the way forward.
Yeah. As you conducted this review, what's the legal and the social context in which we find ourselves in where these crimes are being committed?
Look, the legal context is that there's equality, or nobody can be discriminated against on the basis of their gender identity or their sexual orientation. So there's legal equality in that regard. Any law that is in violation of that would get struck down by the Constitutional Court. The problem is the implementation, and the problem is also the attitudes of society towards LGBTIQ+ people. Which, as you said in the beginning, is also an international phenomena. So that's basically the problem, and the issues then is how can government and civil society partner in terms of looking at ways of addressing this.
Yeah. So generally, I mean, when we look at the international instruments and how international other countries have responded, those with some degree of success have said you would need some specific legislation in place, but that needs to be backed by a policy guidance as well as training. Now, you're speaking of equality in South Africa. Is that equality across all forms of the law, and is that being applied?
We have apart from the Constitution, obviously, we've got the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, which sets up equality courts where people who feel their rights to equality have been violated can go to the court, an equality court. It will be any magistrate's court, any regional court, any high court, to have their case heard, and they are used, probably not to the extent that they should be. So that's the one area. The other is one piece of legislation which is outstanding. It's in Parliament. That's the Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill, which doesn't just deal with crimes against LGBTIQ+ people, but other forms of hate crimes as well. That's unfortunately stuck at the moment, waiting for the judgment of the Constitutional Court in the Koelane and the Masuku matters in terms of what the definition of hate speech can be or how hate speech can be restricted.
Do you believe there needs to be a specific hate crime legislation that has to do with the LGBTQI+ community?
I don't think specifically for LGBTI people, but that there needs to be hate crime legislation for people who are victims of hate crimes. So that could be people who are victims because of their gender identity, sexual orientation, or it could be because of their religion, because of their race. There's a whole range of factors. But so the bill that's in Parliament that we had introduced tries to address or deal with all that and address for everybody who's a victim of a hate crime.
Yeah. What about the perpetrators of this crime? What do we know? Are they state? Are they non-state? Who are these actors?
Look, generally the problems in South Africa are from members of society. Basically homophobia when it comes to the LGBTI people, homophobia, people who can't accept somebody's sexual orientation or gender identity and get violent or abusive over that. There could be problems from state employees, public servants, individuals who have those attitudes. Obviously, public servants are members of society. But when that happens, there should be action taken. So one of the things that the National Task Team had done was to encourage other government departments to develop protocols. And the South African Police Service, for example, developed a protocol of how to deal with LGBTI people who get arrested, how they should be treated to ensure that they're protected even while they're vulnerable, as they're vulnerable while they're under arrest.
Yeah, I'm asking Deputy Ministers because some would say the global phenomenon, the international norm is that the recording and the publishing of the statistics of this type of hate crime are actually quite low, in fact, if non-existent. Is because those who are victims actually end up not reporting. There's huge underreporting because of how the state responds to those reports.
Yeah, I'm sure there is underreporting. The problem with the criminal justice system is that you've got to have evidence to bring forward. Unfortunately, if you just get beaten up, you don't know who beat you up or who raped you or whatever. There's not too much the state can do. One of the things that the National Task Team had established was is still there, a rapid response team, which is a group monitoring the cases that are reported, the crimes against LGBTI people that are reported, and monitoring their progress through the criminal justice system, and also trying to intervene if it appears that at a particular police station there's not much enthusiasm for investigating that case. Yeah. So that's one of the things that's also being done.
Deputy Minister, we appreciate your time and thank you very much for joining us tonight. That is the Deputy Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, John Jeffery. That dialogue with stakeholders on the review of course, the National Strategic Plan and how it is responding to this challenge of the anti-LGBTQI+ hate crime.